quote-unquote comprehensive immigration reform?
It's on.
To me, comprehensive immigration reform has to start with an enforcement of our current laws and enforcement along the border. One of the absolute most effective deterrent to illegal immigration is the fact that people are caught on the border, incarcerated, and returned. Right now, to be caught on the border is just really a minor inconvenience, because they're caught on the border, taken back by a Greyhound bus, and then are free to come right back again. So I would say a starting point of comprehensive immigration reform there has to be some penalty for continuing to come over. We have facilities on the border. You can begin to do a period of incarceration, but you've got to begin to send the signal that if you come over, you break our law, there's going to be consequences. We have not seen that enforced because our president now and the president before was not serious about border enforcement. The second part of comprehensive immigration reform has to be that using E-Verify has to be the law. One of the most disappointing things that I've heard recently is that a lot of our cities, our counties, our school districts, our state will not use the E-Verify system. When our states and our counties and our cities and school districts won't use E-Verify to verify that the very employees that your tax money is hiring won't use E-Verify to verify that they're hiring legal citizens, that's a place we need to begin. And the third element that I would propose is that we have to begin by knowing who is inside of our borders that is here illegally. And we have to be able, I can guarantee that you can't go to Switzerland or Germany and rent a house and get a driver's license and take your wife down and have a baby and then not notice that you're not German and pay for it all. But that's happening today in our country. So we've got a long way to go on that, man. We won't be able to accomplish it in one session. But those are three things we can do proactively.
Okay, focusing on that same topic, there's another question about, it's been recently brought up that some members of the Republican Party have brought up the 14th Amendment and actually changing that. Do you support efforts to add another amendment to the Constitution which will prohibit automatic citizenship, what's called anchor babies, to children born here when neither parent is an American citizen? This would change in effect the effect of Amendment 14, which will only apply to ex-slaves.
I think that we just need to clarify the constitutional amendment, and if we can do that legislatively without having to go through the constitutional process, which can take many years, we should start there. Then we should start a constitutional amendment, and we simply need to clarify this: the baby will be the same, have the same citizenship status as the mother. Okay? If you were to take, back in my younger years, I took my wife in a group every year. We'd go to Switzerland and we'd drive around for a week. Well, one time we went and one of the ladies was pregnant, and she panicked. He said, "What if I'm here and I have my baby in Switzerland? Will my baby be Swiss?" And I said, "Of course not. Your baby will be an American citizen." Nobody doubts that if an American citizen goes overseas and has a baby, that citizen is an American citizen. That's the way we need to clarify it. There won't be any question at that point. and I'm for it. I'm ready to sign up on the bill. That will be among our top 10 things that we will do. Somebody's used Scotch tape on fixing this.
Fiscally conservative. What is your position on extending the Bush tax cuts? Will you support a VAT tax? And what are your thoughts about a flat tax?
Bush, flat, and VAT. I think if we do not extend the Bush tax cuts, that we have in fact imposed a new tax on the American people. I regret that when the tax cuts were put in place in 2001 and 3, they did not have the intestinal fortitude to make them permanent law. I regret that. But we're now living with the consequences of that. Somebody said, well, if you vote to keep the Bush tax cuts, aren't you voting to add the deficit? And I would say this, if I had to make a choice between adding to the deficit by cutting taxes or adding to the deficit by spending $1 trillion in new social programs that will have a perpetual price tag forever and never have any opportunity to pay back, then I'll have to select the tax cuts, because they're I think we have to recognize that Ronald Reagan, one of our greatest presidents, recognized that there were times in our history where building our defenses were more important than not running deficits. And I think this is a time in history where our economy has no chance of recovering if we impose this huge tax increase. I don't like the VAT tax idea. If we turn onto the VAT tax road, then you will have, Congress will be able to just very incrementally tax you out of existence forever. And the true test of a socialistic nation is to look at their basic tax structure. And when you look at the basic tax structure of every socialist country in Europe, at the very core of it is the VAT tax. So we should avoid that. I am for a flat tax. Now, I don't know if I'm for Dick Armey's flat tax. I don't know if I'm for the fair tax. I don't know. I am for a flat tax. I think we begin to have that debate, and I would decide which of the flat taxes is the fairest. I would prefer a 10 or 15% flat tax on revenue, and then do away with just most of the deductions. John Nance Garner, when the income tax was proposed originally, John Nance Garner, it was 1% of income with no deductions. It was John Nance Garner from Texas that proposed that some of the poorer people needed to have the deductions and the richer people needed to pay more. So he proposed, in great Lyndon Johnson's tradition, he proposed that we raise the tax to 2%, and we have a graduated tax, and many in these deductions. Over the years, these deductions have just become myriad. We have a tax code that's 3 foot high, and so we need a flat tax. I have a problem with the fair tax because the rate would be anywhere from 28 to 32%. The second problem I have with the fair tax, that I'm not saying I'm against it, I'm just saying I haven't had a reasonable explanation given to me, is that if you have an income of less than, you will receive under the fair tax plan, your family will receive a prepayment every month from the government to cover the fair tax that they anticipate that you will have to pay the next month on everything you buy. So it sounds to me like the government's going to start cutting a whole lot of checks, and people will pay tax on their